All right, guys, thanks again for joining me. This is Cat's Pajamas here, broadcasting another set of matches out of the IPL Season 2 Qualifier number 3. This is a round of 128 matchup between our Purple Terran player down here at the bottom left-hand corner of Xel'Naga Caverns. He is FXOqxc. His opponent here in the top right-hand corner is Flashback. Flashback spawning as our pink Protoss player, a player that actually came within one match of qualifying for the IPL in the last qualifier. So he has known success in these qualifiers, but he certainly has his work cut out for him as FXOqxc, one of the most fun and, well, really aggressive and interesting players to watch here out of the Terran race. I do love speccing his matches quite a bit. If I don't see any sort of drop play in this match, I will buy hats and then eat them all. So FXOqxc spawning as our Purple Terran, like I said, just throwing up that supply depot for the time being. And looks like he's going to finish that up back on Flashback side of things. Now, Flashback played a very, very passive style game in the set against Forever in the round of 16 at the last qualifier. Really, really passive game. And he was going up against a really, really passive Terran player. It ended up making these large, I don't want to call them stalemates necessarily, but there were just these big periods of inactivity from both players, as both players really didn't want to put on any sort of harassment. They were both very, very prepared for it. So Flashback has to know QXC's style of overt aggression. So we'll see if he ends up defending for that and playing that same very, very passive style, or if he decides to mix it up a little bit, maybe go for something that's a wee bit more aggressive, try and take QXC off his game a little bit. So QXC just finishing up his refinery as well. I believe that came down on 14, so it's a little bit later refinery. And yes, indeed, it is just about to finish up. First Marines are on the way. Orbital Command coming down as well as Flashback does retreat out of the base. Now up here for QXC, or in Flashback's base, QXC's SUV getting some pretty good scouting information because Flashback is not going towards any sort of zealot. He's waiting for that cybernetics core to get done, and he's going to drop down his stalker. We do see a second assimilator coming down for Flashback on 19 supply. That is indicative of a super, super fast sentry expand or just an overt tech 2 something. I mean, whether it be Robo, Stargates, we'll find out here in a bit. You know, most common response is just to go straight for very, very fast Colossi with that second assimilator, especially on this map, especially against a Terran opponent. We'll find out what he does, though. First Stalker about to make its way out. Now, back here on QXC's side of things, he has actually opened up with a reactor-first barracks, double barracks build. It's actually very similar to the Braddock build that I've been dissecting quite a few times. Casted a show match against between Braddock and Desro, where he loves this build, uses it in every race matchup, but specifically against a Protoss player, and it worked really, really well. Now, his only difference is that he only keeps 2 on gas because he doesn't go for a lot of overt upgrades right at the beginning of the game. He'll just opt for a Reaper or a Marauder, depending on what he wants to end up going with, what he scouts out. QXC sitting there with an SUV over at the top left-hand corner. Is that the same scouting SUV? May very well be. 2 more gateways coming down now for Flashback, and he is producing that first sentry. If he follows that up with subsequent sentries, we'll probably see some sort of an expand out of him, and looks like he's going right back into a Stalker, actually, so who knows? We may even see Twilight Council into some sort of Blink Stalker build here in a bit. Back here for QXC, though, he is already pushing up with a lot of units, and what this build really allows you to do is that, you know, you get a relatively fast expand when you go for the reactor first, but you have enough units to be able to hold off any sort of aggression whatsoever and make sick timing pushes that get in right before Warp Gate, which is what we're seeing right here. And it looks like QXC is going to make his way into the expansion, takes down the Nexus, forces a cancel there. This sentry better be ready to drop down a couple of force fields. Nice job there out of Flashback not to be persuaded in dropping down a force field when he didn't want to. Just going to wait for QXC to get back up there in just a second. Here, though, Flashback is dropping down another pylon. I don't know if he's going to try and reestablish his expansion yet or not, because he is floating quite a number of resources. And QXC, he is retreating right now. And even with retreating that early, he has already done significant damage to Flashback. Oh, look at this little Marine there for QXC. Yeah, he is going to be well prepared to go ahead and take down that Nexus to help tonight to take down any sort of probes that are running in as well. But it looks like Flashback, did he actually catch wind of that Marine? I won't actually know, as that Marine did walk back a little bit. But QXC is aware of that expansion. He himself is establishing a command center inside of his base, and he's putting up a bunker for some nice overt defense there. 3 barracks up for QXC. With that factory coming down, he's just going to transition into an MMM style of play. Flashback, on the other hand, is putting up a robotics facility. So let's take stock of where players are at economically here. Looks like a 5-worker advantage for Flashback, but of course, QXC has down mules. 1 mule at a time for now, and he's going to be establishing himself another orbital command here in just a second, so that double mule production should put him ahead in terms of economy by a little bit. And let's see here. Nexus just about to finish now for Flashback. He has started to use quite a bit of those resources a little more effectively now. It looks like 4th gateway coming down as well, so 4-gate robo build. I would expect a super quick transition over to a robotics bay once this observer comes out, the eventual observer. And there we go. Marine comes in. Wow, does manage to get himself a probe kill. Very nice. Still doing some damage with that Marine. Does a good bit of scouting as well. QXC, though, just up with this huge bioforce. Combat shields on the way. Stimpack is finished. And here we go. There is our first medevac coming out. QXC not actually committing the gas towards any sort of a reactor yet. Oh, and he's going for it very fast. Ghost Academy. So Ghost Academy on the way. Going to be able to do some nice EMP play. Let's take a look, though. He doesn't have an engineering bay, I don't believe. No, he does not. Now, there's a medevac. We'll see if he immediately loads up a drop, or if he's going to be content to save up a little bit of energy and run in earlier, or run in later. QXC now making his way up with that Marine. He is going to get some more scouting information, but of course it does come into view of this probe at the Zelnaga Tower. Nice job by Flashback to react quickly. Gets up there with a couple of stalkers. So let's see, that robotics bay is about 2/3 of the way finished. Flashback still content to stay on that 4-gate robo here for the time being. He is actually up in supply overall. QXC playing very passively thus far. Looks like he wants to make... He ran up before with that the very natural timing when you have the 2 racks before you decide to establish yourself an expansion, but then just really hasn't put on any sort of pressure whatsoever, which is a little surprising out of him. And unfortunately, this observer does see all, so QXC's force is revealed. That observer will take up position there outside of the force of QXC. Should help it to avoid detection there for a little while. Looks like QXC may see it. No, maybe doesn't yet for the time being. Flashback, though, he has quite a few stalkers ready. He does not have a Colossus up, and he has invested heavily in Colossi technology. But his macro has been very good, and he has been keeping a pretty good supply advantage, although he had cut workers for a while because somehow QXC was able to equalize that 5-worker deficit in addition to having mules. So Flashback not producing as many workers as he possibly could have. Flashback about to finish a forge as well. I believe that's his first one. Yes, no double forge play quite yet. There we go, and there's a Twilight Council coming down. QXC at the same time is going to establish himself a nice gold expansion. So he is going to be quite good economically. Another Marine running its way up, stimmed. It's not going to see any sort of expansions. And QXC playing the macro game very well. He's running units everywhere just to make sure that there are no expansions being taken. QXC now going to stim himself into the base. Very nice. He's able to see basically everything. The Marine does die, but that was well worth it in terms of scouting information. Now QXC is going to make his way over here to the top left-hand corner and see that next Nexus, but also see how far it is behind. So QXC is... Wow. Flashback really worried about drops. But he is voluntarily splitting his force in 2, so if QXC is able to force a frontline engagement, that's going to put his opponent Flashback in a very bad position. So many of those stalkers are separated from most of the main force, and that actually represents the difference in supply between these 2 players. So QXC on 0-1 upgrades. He's going to 1-2. Flashback still with 0-0. Another Marine does go down. QXC just poking and prodding. This is a very nice job of just keeping his opponent locked in position. I'm not sure how well he knows Flashback's play, but Flashback has been super, super passive in every game I've watched of him so far. And that's not necessarily bad. I'm not criticizing passive, because he plays a very good macro game. But if QXC is aware of that, he's just forcing him to play even more passive than maybe he would normally. 4 more gateways coming up at the same time. Going to complement the 4 that are already on the field. Still just single robo production here. QXC with the Planetary Fortress at the gold. His economy does look very, very good. He's actually up in workers now, and he's going to go to a 4th base. So he just playing the macro game, and is quite content to do so. Taking a look at the units that are on the field, he actually still only has that 1 medevac. Everything else is going over to Viking production right now, as there are 3 Colossi on the field. That is probably a wise decision. Scan does go down to see exactly how many forces Flashback has. They are still on just 0-0-1 upgrades. Weapons level 2 making their way out. And when QXC does finish up this next Terran infantry weapons, maybe time to attack. He has pulled an advantage in the supply. Looks like QXC is now going to drop, but of course there is a set of stalkers waiting for him. Flashback knows his opponent well. Here comes QXC, though, going to make his way in. He's evading detection. No, he isn't! Because Flashback does blink in, picks off that medevac full of Marines. That is a pretty good win there for Flashback. But look at the amount of resources that Flashback is floating at this point. There we go. Thank you, Flashback. 4 more gates about to make their way down. That is going to represent 12 gates then, when all is said and done. However, QXC does have quite a few forces. He has a huge number of Vikings up as well. Totally fine with bypassing medevacs for the time being. Just getting those ghosts and Vikings. Of course, that EMP going to do a world of hurt to Flashback's forces. So, Flashback positioning himself up next to his gold. Don't know if he wants to move down yet or not. QXC, though, is on 79 SCVs. That does actually account for the supply difference between the 2 players. So both players' armies are about the same size. QXC does have the upgrade advantage, and he's going to 2-3 at the same time. There we go. There's all the gateways finishing up now for Flashback. These guys are witnessing an 18-minute no rush. It's quite all right, though. This is going to make for one ridiculously large battle here in a second. QXC banking his forces, though, to replenish those whenever the time comes. Advancing with his Vikings there. And that should allow him to do some pretty good damage to those Colossi. Yes, he is doing that. Looks like a couple of EMPs did go down. QXC's forces, though, are largely getting cleaned up because he actually looks like he overcommitted to Vikings. And that was actually a good bit of positioning and a good bit of decision-making there by Flashback as well, because Flashback made the conscious decision to bypass the Vikings, sacrifice his Colossi just to allow those Stalkers to do more damage. So QXC trying to do whatever he can as far as gather some forces up, picks off a couple of units pretty well. DT's in the mix as well. That's going to be a pretty big bonus for Flashback. And QXC is forced to land his Vikings, and when you're forced to land your Vikings, that always puts you in a situation that you do not want to be in, because they do not trade cost effectively against the ground gateway units, as well upgraded as they are for Flashback. So Flashback does crash through the last bunker. QXC now forced to pull a bunch of his SEVs. He has killed many of the support, the stronger units that absorb most of the damage. Only one Zealot remaining here. But there's the rest of the charge lots coming in now for Flashback. He is going to do quite a bit of damage. The last Blink moves in as well. That Blink doing a lot of damage. And FXOqxc may be forced to tap out here in just a second, as he is losing the vast majority of his economy. He is now down by 60 supply as well. Not going to pick up that orbital command. It does go down. And now we see Flashback going ahead. Very, very nice job. Puts down force field to stop any sort of reinforcements. QXC says, fine, I will just make a giant wall. So there we go. Flashback going to make his way up. Archon's on the low ground as well. Those are going to pick off so many units. So Archon's so strong at this point, especially with the 002 upgrades. And Protoss Ground Weapons Level 3 was just about to finish, but QXC was forced to tap out. He does GG, dropping game number 1 here to Flashback. So congratulations to Flashback, who moves up 1-0 on QXC and trying to make another strong run at making it back into the qualifying round here at the IPL Season 2 Qualifier week number 3. So guys, don't go anywhere. Game number 2 coming up here in just a second.